my few minutes, Olivia is going to talk about Sentry, and so I briefly introduce myself. So I joined Cloudera last year in May, but previously I worked even in Yahoo here, so it's a very familiar place. It's good to see you all here. Thank you for coming. So here is my outline of my talk. So I'm talking about Sentry, and especially how Sentry can help you to secure your enterprise Hadoop cluster. So first, I give you some background information about why Sentry is created, and some brief information about security concepts in the context of Hadoop ecosystem. Then I will introduce Sentry, especially about how it works and its architecture. Then a little bit about the roadmap of Sentry, followed by a demo and by Australia. Of course, joint UN at the end. So first is good news. Hadoop is getting bigger, and that means allow more and more users or enterprises are adopting Sentry for their mission critical application or platform. Of course, more and more data are pulling on the Hadoop cluster, and sometimes even sensitive data. And of course, the data are exposed to more and more users. So one typical use case is data warehouse offload, which means Hadoop is used to either replace or augment your data warehouse solution. Therefore, a lot of tools that are provided like Apache Drill and the Cloudera Impala. So they are popular because they all provide a familiar simple interface. But there are problems as well. So first, enterprise wants to protect their sensitive data. And there are legal requirements that certain security measures have to be in place. These regulations, such as HIPAA, PII, PCI, FISMA. However, the existing Hadoop security, well, we all know that Hadoop is not secure in the first place. So this problem actually prevents the further adoption of Hadoop. Therefore, security has become the first top priority for many of the components in Hadoop ecosystem. So a lot of effort has been put on security, Hadoop security, but the reality is different components has so far provided different mechanism for security, but multiple tools or components may access the same data. So securing just one component isn't good enough. So my words describe Hadoop is that Hadoop was born of us rather than security. I guess everybody knows that. What does that mean? So a little bit brief information about Hadoop security. That is specifically about authentication, authorization, and monitoring and data protection. So authentication, of course, is identify who the user is, the user's identity. Verify by what the user has or knows, like a password or has some security token. So first way to secure your cluster would be like you prevent unauthorized access to isolate your cluster so that nobody can access. So that's what you get by default. So if that's not enough, you can enable what Hadoop has provided, the kernels. And kernels provide a strong authentication. But you can also use sometimes instead of verbose, you want to use your existing user directory to do the user authentication. Some versions of like the Active Directory actually integrated with the verbose, which provide a single point of truth for the authentication. Of course, if it's secure, you want more. You want to convenience as well. So single sign-on sometimes is needed. So a little bit about verbose. Is for strong authentication, provides the mutual authentication between the service and the service users, and provide, because there's a central truth, like PDC, that protects against the use logging or replay attacks. And so usually a user and the service, they all have a principal, and the credential is slightly different. For user, it's a password. For the service, it's a PTAP. So let's see. So authorization, once the user is authenticated, they want to do something with the data in the cluster. So authorization basically determines what the user can do. So the existing authorizations that are provided by Hadoop is what the HDFS provided, the fire permission, read, write, execute on user, global, and the word. Of course, it's cross-grain. So other components has their prior authorization, like MR, queues, they can determine who can launch MR jobs, HBase, ACLs, and table and column security, and the authorization. The impersonation is sometimes it's used if a component of a tool that has no way of do authorization, so it impersonates the user and hoping that the underlying system, like the HDFS, will be able to do the authorization for the user. Data protecting mostly about encryption, so data can be in transit or at rest. So Hadoop is already has encryption capability for the data at rest. But for data, not for actually for the data in transit, so like for those protocols, encryption can be turned on. But there's no existing issue encryption support for the data at rest. So it relies on the OS level encryption. Of course, there's the Shiva, which is very active right now. So stay tuned. Governance and auditing basically provide a means of logging, tracing things that are related to security. And of course, different components also provide a different mechanism. So now here is Sentry. So what Sentry does? Sentry doesn't do authentication, but it does authorization. So as we see from about discussion, existing authorization is very fragmented, and the different components provide different means of authorization. So the existing, most of the time, the existing way to do the authorization is manipulating the file permissions from HDFS, and since a file can be shared in one group, so and you either share the file or you share nothing. So therefore it's coarse grain and it's manual. So what if you want to share the file in multiple groups, or if you just want to share part of the file, but not the particular numbers in the file. So a lot of times to start that problem, and the IT person or they just to put the files in unprotected, say everybody can access, because control this is very problematic, and the manual takes a lot of time. So what we see is that the enterprise needs a centralized place to do the authorization across these components. And this mechanism should be easily used in a role-based and should be fine-grained. So Sentry is this authorization module for high search in HANA and beyond. So it has these capabilities of being secure, fine-grained, and role-based, and it has the multi-tenancy support. So it's open source. It has been in the incubator for about 1 year, and existing components that are supported, including Apache Solar, Server 2, and the Impala 1.1 and above. So the benefits of using Sentry, so you can be more comfortable to put the sensitive data on your Hadoop, and you can expand the data to all users, and of course you can satisfy the legal requirements. So we already talked about these abilities. So fine-grained. So in Sentry you can secure in the GD where you can secure the servers, databases, tables, and views. For like a search, you can specify also, you can control the index and the connections. The role-based, so you authorize the user based on the role that the user plays in your enterprise, not based on the modifier he can access, or so that provide familiar terms in terms of in the traditional what the traditional database to provide. And multi-tenancy support, because Sentry policy allows you to include such policies. For example, in simple word, for each DB you can have a separate Sentry policy, and each can be assigned to a different administrator. So this is the overall architecture of the Apache Sentry. So in the middle, we see that the two blue box or green boxes is a policy engine benefit, and to the actually authorization, the evaluates based on the policy rules that are provided, and determine whether the access should be granted or should be rejected. So on the top is the binding layer. So each box we can think of as some hookup code. For those components that in Impala 5, they need to make a method call or make service call into Sentry to determine when authorization, when they need to check the authorization, whether the user has the permission to do certain things. So on the lower, it is we call the policy provider. Basically, it's a storage for the policies. Right now, you can store in a file, or you can store it in a database, which is in progress. So this is how Sentry works. So this, in the context of the SQL word, for example, in Hive gets got a SQL statement, and Hive parses it and validate it against SQL's grammar. Then if everything goes fine, it construct the tree as AST. With that, it is able to validate the statement objects, basically check who is the user and what the tables or fields the user is trying to access, and make an authorization call in Sentry. Sentry will reply based on the policies, say either yes or no. So then I will go either reject the exclusion of the query or accept it, depending on the response from Sentry. So this is pretty introducing the elements or the objects that are involved in policy evaluation. There are user group membership, and resources, privilege, roles. User basically is the user who is trying to gain access to the data. User group is what groups that the user belongs to. you can obtain the user's group membership from the user directory or sometimes from HDFS. Resources is the data you want to protect. Resources could be services or basically is any thing that you want to protect, you want to do authorization on. So it could be table views, or could be connections, or could be URLs. So privilege is defined as an action on certain resources. You can say select on a given table or purely on a search connection. Roles is a connection of privileges. So roles is usually like defining who correspond to the role that the user plays, like business analytics in your organization or IT specialist. So the central part of the policy is the group role mapping. So you assign the role to certain group so that all the members in the group has all the privileges included in the role. So here's how the detailed information about how the evaluation is conducted. So first, who is the user and which group the user belongs to, what resource is accessed, and in what way, like is they right, in what way the resource is accessed. Then Sentry will determine if there's if any of the users group has the right privilege that allows this action on these resources. So if the answer is yes, so the response is go ahead. Otherwise, it will say no and the most sufficient privilege. So this is some map items that we have in mind. So we certainly like to introduce Sentry into more components in the Hadoop ecosystem. And we like to have a centralized policy store and with the capability of banking and revoking. And we also like to provide a centralized service for all protected resources in the whole Hadoop ecosystem. So right now, Sentry is a library where each component is to include in order to make the authorization work. But then we like to provide some services that we accompany the code level company. So we certainly appreciate your contribution and support. So without further, we'd like to invite my teammates as Julia to give us a wonderful demo about Sentry.
Hi everyone. I hope everyone can hear me. Good evening. My name is Kavya again. Thanks Suku. So as Rupu mentioned, as of today, Sentry supports Impala, Hive, and Search. We'll walk through a small demo, example deployment where we use Sentry to, provide access control to all these three components. So in our demo, we'll be using, as I said, all three components. So for the folks who haven't heard of Impala, so Impala is an interactive SQL engine on top of Hadoop. And Search is an open source project which is built on top of Solar. So if you think of it, each of these components have a very different data models. So for example, Hive and collections, indices, and documents. So Sentry handles both these data models as a split. So in the case of databases, we have table, views, database, server, URI, and so on. And on top of each of these data objects, Sentry provides a set of privileges. Coming to the search world, as of today, we provide privileges on collection. So we provide all privileges, or query privileges, or insert on your update only privileges. So as Roman has briefly presented to you, I just wanted to talk about you as well because we'll be using you in the demo. I have all the scripts and policy files I will be using in the demo in the public GitHub if any of you want to try it. And definitely, Sentry is an Apache incubating project, so we would really welcome any kind of contributions. So this is a Tolerance Manager UI. It's very simple to enable Sentry. For example, you have to just enable just the check mark. It's that simple. And right now we need to enable this Sentry for each of the components. Look at the policy files. So by default, hide and Impala policy file acting at this location using a hide Sentry. So as you mentioned, there are usually two sections in the policy file. There's this group section where we have groups to roles mapping. And we have a role section where we have roles to privileges mapping. So in our example, we have three sets of groups: admin, senior analyst, and junior analyst. And if you look at the roles here, admin has all the privileges on server 1, which means admin will be able to do anything on this instance of server. And the senior analyst, if you look at it, has permissions on this particular table called sample07, and he also has permissions, select permissions on another table called sample08. And the junior analyst has just permissions on a particular view. So as you can see, different users have different levels of granular permissions. Now let's look at the policy file for search. So we have the same set of groups. If you see here, the roles mapping is different because the data model itself is different. So the admin role, so one piece of information before we look at it is the way search works is all the administrative tasks are performed on admin collection. So if you want to give a user all the administrative privileges on search, you have to give all privileges on the admin collection. So that's the reason we have all permissions on the collection admin here. And we're also giving update permissions on all of the collections to admin, so that admin will be able to update indices whenever necessary. And the senior analyst has all the permissions on two of the collections, sensitive logs collection and logs collection. And the junior analyst has just query privileges on just one collection, logs collection. So again, as you can see, different users have different, varying degrees of access control. So now that we looked at both the policy files, let's log in as these three users and see how the access differs. So right now we are logged in as admin. Admin can see a bunch of databases here, DB1, DB2, DB3 and so on. And admin has all privileges, so we should be able to create a database. So he was able to successfully create a database. And similarly, this user should be able to create new tables, create views, and so on. And if you look at the search world, remember we just gave update privileges to the admin. So admin in our, according to our policy file, shouldn't be given permissions to view the collections. So if you try to access these collections, Sentry throws an exception. It doesn't allow admin to view the collection. So let's look at our next user. So you can see the difference here. Senior analyst is able to see only default database because that's what he's given privileges to. So he's able to see both sample 07 and sample 08 tables. So in the search world, if you remember, senior analyst, we give permissions to all permissions to both the collections. So we should be able to, see the collections, be able to search in the collection and so on. Next user, junior analyst, he has more restricted permissions. So if we go to Impala and if you do the show tables, you can only see the view. So this view was created on top of a table. So privileges, if you want to give a user privileges to only certain set of columns and certain rows, then you can create a view and give a user permission just for view, but not underlying table. So you can really, give very fine-grained permissions to users. gave permissions on logs collection, but not sensitive logs collection for this user. So if you try to access sensitive logs, Sentry will